Sorry, my name is Mark Hepworth. I'm not used to this. Right. I co-founded something called The Good Economy. It's impact advisory business, and what we do is all our clients, pretty much so anyway, are private institutional investors, the likes of L&G, M&G, going all the way through to a range of other investors. And our main purpose really is to get institutional investment into this country rather than squirting it over to Japanese hedge funds somewhere else, and to essentially develop a place-based lens through which they can look at opportunities in this country. So that's our work. We're 10 years old. We've got our 10-year birthday party in the Shard, fancy place, in the Shard, hosted by Foresight. So I've done the music list. It all goes back. I'm 74 now. I'm as old as the NHS. That's why I'm very much for not kicking it around. Right. This is the most precious social capital we have in this country. So I'm going to start off talking about what we do on place-based impact investment and social infrastructure. And then Sam Munger, who heads up all the programs of work we do, is going to provide you with a lot more of the substance on funding, investment, and so on. So with no further ado, that worked. Just echoing what Michael Marmot just had to say over there, I thought was quite interesting. The government at the moment has this kind of mantra on economic growth going on. Growth, growth, growth. That seems to be the purpose of things. And yet, our economy has grown 5,000 times since the publication of Oliver Twist around 1840. It's 5,000 times bigger, and we've got 4 million kids living in poverty, 4 million Oliver Twists around the country. So the first thing you have to ask, and I think he was asking it out there, is what is it about it that how do we get into this state where we don't give a shit about most of the kids living in this country? Right? And this is a major, major issue for me, because as I've got older, I begin to wonder why we are in such a state. Do we not care? Do we have anything about inclusive growth, any semblance of inclusive growth in our DNA in this country? This is the tone I'm setting. And that diagram on the right-hand side is inspired by my grandkids. And basically it's the story of the frogs in the frying pan. They don't notice it getting hotter and hotter until they boil to death. You must know that. So with my grandkids in mind, I don't have long left to live. But my grandkids have got years in front of them. Right? And if you look at Diane Coyle's latest book about how you judge whether or not things are getting better, it's if you believe that your grandkids are going to live in a better world than you. Okay? Just thought I'd lay my colours and lay my thing on the table there for you. I'm going backwards, forwards. We do a lot of work on social infrastructure at The Good Economy. This is one of the big three: housing, education, and health. If you get these right, and I don't have to tell you this, do I, that we would get things right generally. The countries that are doing best economically are the countries that invest a lot in social infrastructure, because that's what makes the economy go round. Go round. God, this bloody mic. Right. Okay, look at me. Right. This is me. This is me with my social infrastructure in Richmond upon Thames. Right? On the left-hand side you've got over there, if I'm reading this right, is the Etna Community Centre, which is a charity. and where I go to play in the over 50s ping pong club. It's wonderful, right? And when you go there, you meet lots of good people, and it costs me £3 a go every week. There's about a dozen of us. The real nice thing about it is that people forget what the score is. There's an ageist remark for you. On the other side of it, so I do that twice a week, but even more so, I go to this place called the Third Space Health Club. Anybody heard of this? It's the poshest gym in London, and therefore the country. Right. 250 quid a month for that. It's all white towels everywhere. By the way, I'm leaving it because I can't stand it anymore. But that's owned by a US private equity company, and they own the Pig Hotels. Anyone been to the Pig Hotels? Well, they own that as well, okay? So the question I'm asking there, does it matter who owns it? Does it really matter who owns what we use as social infrastructure? That's the question I'm trying to get to, right? That place there, Third Space, it was 2 years building. It used to be Dickens and Jones, a department store. Anybody heard of that? Right? It went, that came. And the people who go in there are a bit like me, slim, muscular, tattoos, right? Loads of us on the cross trainer together. Right, okay. So you get the point. The point I'm making there about does it matter? This country has basically gone through a process of immiserising growth. Right, over the years that I've been working, 50 years, economic development, every part of this country, every place in this country, from the time I left Warwick back in 1972, where I did economics, to when I came back after doing the PhD over at Toronto and Harvard. I came back, went up to Newcastle, discovered the North-South divide. It's called immiserising growth. That's by Bhagwati. It's one of the main international economists. And if you position us in relation to poverty and regional inequality, that's where we are. We're next to Turkey. We're next to all of these awful Eastern European countries, right? That's where we are. Now, what occurs to me, having spent all my 50 years doing this stuff up and down the country, is we have not succeeded, have we? Basically. So how do we do things new and differently from what we've been doing? I call that a good domestic economy. That's my vision of things. An ideal social infrastructure is important. I'll talk about the Kondratiev wave in a minute. But what I'd like to get to is when we talk about places and investing in places, what sort of places are you going to try and create? And what kind of economy are you trying to create, right, which makes those places sustainable financially, jobs, enterprise, and so on? What type of economy are we talking? I call it the good domestic economy. This was before Trump came in. It was because I believe we should be growing our own food, making our own clothes, at least more of it, okay, instead of getting everything from somewhere else. That is a bad idea. And if we're going to start doing things new and differently, then what we've got to do is to grow a domestic, strong domestic economy, which has those characteristics. When we look forwards to it, I'm a long wave economist and theorist. That's, in other words, I believe, like Schumpeter, in innovation, entrepreneurship, but innovation pretty important. And what Schumpeter said after Kondratiev was there are 50 years, the capitalist system moves in 50-year cycles. The next long wave is holistic health. I'm sorry you can't see that, but the slides will become available to you. But that thing on the right-hand side there is a bigger view of health than just the NHS. It's also biotechnology and so on. If you look at things, this is the most important economic driver for the next 50 years, holistic health. All aspects of it, which is in there. So don't kick around the NHS. Right? You don't. You don't throw away your most precious asset. Rebuild the damn thing properly and manage it properly. Stop giving the jobs to all the management. Put more money into the coalface, put more technology into it, and get it spread out into every community across the country. Anyway, so I see places very particularly have grown this incredible new health economy. That would suit place renewal, that would suit place development, and ultimately what we need to be doing is rebuilding places, and I'm telling you, build it around the health economy. Make place, put place at the center of the economy rather than the sidelines. Because the economy is whatever you want it to be, isn't it? It's not God-given. I mean, I've done about 20 different versions of economics over the years. And all you get on TV is, inflation is going up, right? Growth is going down. This is bullshit. It's macroeconomics bullshit, right? Stop. You like places, start with the health economy. So, this is my ostrich. That's why you're seeing an ostrich, the fastest thing on two legs on the planet, right? It can go at 30 miles an hour for 40 minutes non-stop. So you've got to have two legs to what we're doing in the economy, not just a so-called modern industrial strategy. Why it's modern, I don't know. And also you've got devolution and all of the other things that you know and love, that the government, we're raining strategies at the moment. I'm sure you would agree on that. There are so many strategies, right? But we need to unify social infrastructure, business clusters. That over there in the middle is telling you how you can go around working out what you're spending money on, what you should be spending money on. And essentially, that is an ostrich economy. And it goes from the country all the way down to the neighborhood, place by place, everywhere. This is called place-based impact investing. I guess I was the architect of that about May 21, it came out May 21. And essentially what we're doing over there is saying there are all these investors, there's trillions knocking around, by the way, in the city. It's a kind of irony, we talk about an underinvestment problem. Don't you find that strange? When we are the most important global financial power, right, with the States. But this is essentially the model we use, crossing different areas of the place-based economy. And we have investors at the top, and we have place-based stakeholders at the bottom. And each one of those pillars is either an asset class or it's a policy domain. And that circle there tells you what a place-based impact investment should look like in theory. And on that note, I'll hand you to someone who knows how to use a mic.
Let's see. Thank you, Mark. Can I have the clicker? Yeah. That was the one. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess going back to Mark's earlier question about does it matter who pays for this stuff and is anyone paying for enough of it in the first place? So one of the groups that we're looking at the moment who could pay for more of it are the local government pensions. So the government has just launched a big pensions investment review report. It covers both the local government pension service and also a number of the big DC funds through the Mansion House Accord. I'm going to focus today mainly on the local government side of it because I think it's really interesting from a place perspective. So you think about the people who are the beneficiaries of local government pensions, obviously local government workers, but also public sector workers based in other local organisations like education and emergency services and so on. So it's very much people who have lived and worked in a place and probably mostly expect to retire in that same place. And so their first priority is obviously to have a decent pension, but they'd probably also quite like to live in a decent place as well and be able to go off and play their over 50s ping pong and going on the treadmill with all the other buff 75-year-olds as well. So there's an obvious kind of read across there, and the government has noticed, as we told them a few years ago, and they've kind of now made it into policy that actually we don't in this country use enough of our own pension fund money to invest within our own domestic economy. So they've now said that local government pension funds all need to come up with a target allocation to local investment, and that's something they're having to do over the next few months. So this is a very live conversation. So I'm going to get this to move forward. Yeah, so we did as Mark mentioned, a big white paper around this whole concept of place-based impact investing about 4 years ago, and we actually used the local government pension service as a case study in that report, saying at the moment they're investing probably less than 2% within the real economy in the UK, and if they were to invest even up to 5% of their assets, that would be a huge sort of shot in the arm for a lot of this sort of social infrastructure. So there was a big opportunity there, and now on the back of the government's policy, we're now in the process of writing a second white paper, which is very much more specific, saying, okay, the government's now set this aspiration, how are we actually going to put this into practice? And we've got co-sponsorship from across the LGPS world, from the individual administering authorities and the pools, and we've also got a number of the fund managers they work with behind that. So that will be coming out in the next month or so. I should probably be at home writing it now rather than talking to you, but once we get through that, it'll be out there in the public domain, and so watch out for that coming out. In terms of what's been going on already, now a number of local government pension funds have done quite a lot of this already, but there's a long tail of those who haven't. Probably the most well-known in this space is Greater Manchester. They've been doing it for over 20 years, but there's a number of others that you probably can't read on the chart there, but people like South Yorkshire, Clwyd in Wales, London and Cornwall. And the first chart on the left, you probably can't read the key, but that basically shows how much they allocate within the UK, how much within their region, and how much within their locality. So there's a real spread in terms of what people have meant by local investing. And on the right-hand side, it's showing the split of what they invest in those different pillars that Mark mentioned earlier. So bottom one is real estate, and then we go into SME finance, which is a really important area in boosting the local economy. Orange is housing, and then the yellow is infrastructure. We've got a little bit of social investment going on, and then clean energy is another one that's particularly big for Cornwall because it reflects the nature of their local economy. So you can see that people have taken different approaches and also invested across a range of different asset classes to meet that sort of local investment idea. But as I said, there's a very large number of funds who haven't really touched the surface of this yet. So there's potentially a big amount of capital that's about to become available for this kind of long-term investment that we so badly need. Now, again, you won't be able to see the detail of this. We'll share it later. But the point of this is that in order to get that investment flowing, you need to understand the funding ecosystem, and you need to understand how different parties within that ecosystem are motivated, how they interact with each other, and how you get the funds flowing through the system. So basically, the top right-hand side of this is about the pension funds or the local pension asset owners. They then specify what they need through these pools who aggregate their requirements. They go out often to fund managers with different specialisms, and it's they who then interact with the place stakeholders on the left-hand side. And we think it's really important that places think about having a coalition within the place. So it's not just about an individual local or combined authority, it's about them working together with other key stakeholders locally, like universities or NHS trusts or big local employers, all of whom have a stake in what's the housing stock look like here, what other community assets do we need, etc., to make this whole economy work well. So if they can get together, have a shared vision of what they're trying to achieve, it just makes it a lot easier for the fund managers to engage. But what we see at the moment is a lot of confusion from different players in this space about how they should be interacting with each other. You get sometimes developers going directly to local government pension funds who then say, that's really interesting, your scheme, but we can't deal with you directly. You need to come via our fund manager. So one of the things we're hoping to come out of this big policy review, and I'll work on the back of it, is a lot more clarity for people to say, this is what local investing looks like, this is what you can invest in, this is what works, and this is who you need to talk to and what they can do for you. So that's a really important part of this. Now, we have created a reporting framework that a number of these local government funds have been using for a while now. So Greater Manchester with the Trailblazers, I think 2 years ago they did the first one. So this wheel is showing the breakdown of what they've invested in locally. So the big colours are, again, real estate on the green, SME finance at the bottom, then housing and infrastructure. But you can then drill down within that and look at what specifically areas have they invested in underneath those sectors. And so, for example, within housing, the big chunk of it is open market, but then there's stuff around supported and affordable housing and discounted rent and et cetera. And then there's a separate piece under infrastructure for social infrastructure, and then there's a piece on social investment. So you can really drill down into what are the areas they're investing in. We can also map it geographically to see where it sits within their region, and then we can also grade it in terms of how much it's actually trying to drive proper social impact as opposed to just being returns focused. So we've got this framework set up. It's becoming the standard. It was designed in concert with the LGPS funds and the fund managers, so they've all kind of collectively bought into it, and I think it's a really good starting point for this new policy agenda. Now, this is looking at things from the local government side within this and the Place Coalition. We did a piece of work in the Midlands late last year, early this year, really looking at how could the Midlands catch up with Greater Manchester in terms of driving this level of investment. And what we've come up with here is a model where you have that local Place Coalition that I talked about. It collectively agrees what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve, what are the economic, social, environmental outcomes this place needs to achieve. And that then forms a golden thread that runs through all the activity from setting the vision through to setting up the interagency governance model, which is really important. How do you get these different agencies to work together to make sure that decisions are being made fairly and they're not being dominated by local politics, and we're actually investing in things that make commercial as well as impact sense. And then things like sharing data across these bodies is really important. How do we get to more transparency in this part of the market, which is often quite opaque to people? So again, that's published already, called Place-Based Prosperity. It was done for the Midlands Engine, which unfortunately is one of the casualties of the devolution agenda, so they no longer exist, but the report still persists on the internet, so do go and check that out. What have we got next? Yeah, so I guess institutional investment, has become much bigger over the last few decades within the UK. We work with a lot of the players, as Marcus said. As you can see a lot of the logos on the screen. We know that this government's agenda is going to cost a huge amount of money across multiple areas. Just on housing alone, we're talking 19 to 25 billion of funding needed to deliver the 1.5 million new homes. And then there's all the ambitions around energy, and we know that the sort of schools infrastructure is very underinvested in and so on. Debt is remaining a really important part of this, but it's only ever going to be part of the solution. So there's a lot of equity finance that can come through this kind of pension fund-led route. And I think the fact that the pension funds have this kind of naturally long-term focus is a really good match with the infrastructure aspect of this as an investment class. And we do see, there's a lot of risk around impact washing, but we're kind of here to sort of try and keep people honest and actually identify those people who really mean it. And so we try and push the fund managers we work with to be as impactful as possible and help place stakeholders to identify the people who have values aligned with theirs. Just to pick one example out, a very recent announcement was with Newcore Capital, who've just announced a partnership with Swansea Pension Fund, specifically around social infrastructure, and that's a £50+ million commitment. They're also looking for other investors to come in, and it's very much aligned around a set of impact objectives, and that's just one of many examples. So there's a lot going on in this space at the moment. It's very, very active. Mark, did you want to do the final reflections? Getting a bit too comfortable there.
Can you hear me all right? Yeah. Okay, I hope this is kind of vaguely relevant or interesting to you. I'm not even sure, because when I'm looking at your faces, I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm just not sure. It really matters that we invest in our places and find ways of doing it. So a lot of work we do, this isn't the full range of things that we do at the Good Economy. We also work, Sarah and I came out of Big Issue Invest, by the way. So it matters quite considerably that we have this kind of way of thinking about how do we fund things. And how do we fund things in a way which is more reflective of bottom-up thinking rather than having everything come down, raining down on us, the next announcement and so on. That's I guess what we're trying to get over. That's what we mean by place. Great book by Edmund Phelps called Mass Flourishing. He's at University of Columbia in New York, and he wrote about grassroots innovation, mass flourishing as being the characteristics of a good economy. So we've got to rediscover ourselves, us, our community, right? Because a lot of this doesn't require money. I hope I'm not conveying some kind of ideology of financial determinism, inadvertently and untowardly, I should say. Not everything requires money. I had a set to with a guy on Richmond Bridge yesterday. You would have been proud of me. Right. I'm walking across this medieval bridge in Richmond. Are you familiar with this bridge, by the way? Yes? Okay. I'm walking across it like this, with my Waitrose bag, all right? And suddenly, whoop, right on the right-hand side. This is a very narrow bridge, by the way. Medieval, narrow bridge, narrow pavements, and Richmond by now has become a cesspit. Too many people there. Ever since they built that club, not to mention the Ted Lasso souvenir shop behind it, right? It's become unbearable to someone like me at my age, right? Anyway, I'm like that. The first one goes past, a big black guy, right? And I kind of go, get off the bike, you know, on the pavement, right? And he goes like that and he carries on, right? I'm like that, still carrying on regardless. And another one shows up, zips past me like that, right? And I have another go, oh, you know, I'm shouting. Luckily, I caught up with him. Luckily. I said, cycling on the pavement is illegal. Illegal. And in 2012, I discovered there was a whole campaign to stop people cycling on the pavement on Richmond Bridge itself. So I'm now going to become a community activist and go after them, right? And actually go after the council. Who's looking after this fucking place, right? No sign that anyone's looking after it. So this is nothing to do with money. It's to do with civic behaviour and looking after each other, right? That's what it should be about. So social infrastructure is important, but look after things properly. The second thing is their economic milieu. I've told you, build a new health economy, get in front of everybody around health in place. Think about this very broadly, right? How we can effectively build a new health economy with place as being where we do it. You don't have to do it in an R&D lab to build a health economy, right? So that's my kind of pet thing, by the way. Yes, Sam said we need patient financial and social capital. It's quite difficult working with some of the people we work. We work with very big institutional financial institutions. But I think there's enough people within them who want to do the right thing. You know, it's just finding them, actually finding those people, joining up the dots. And then finally, it all is about collaboration and self-respect and mutual self-respect. So we empathize with each other. After I said to this guy it's illegal, right, I really put my foot in it, good and proper. And I said, I'm going to take a picture of you and your bike. Because it's one of those big motorised bikes. It's more like a motorcycle. This is crazy driving across Richmond Bridge. The pavement's only that wide, right? And then he goes off. He says, have a good day. I'll stop there. Okay. I'm done.
Thanks, Mark. We've got time for a few questions, I think, whether about Richmond Bridge or anything else. I think there's a microphone that can be passed out if anyone's
Yeah.
wants to ask anything.
Hi. Sorry. Thank you. Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm an architect, but I work a lot with community benefit societies and community land trusts that are in urban places making the kind of affordable social infrastructure that you're talking about. And they want to get into housing, want to get more investment, want to get pension funds to invest into their programs and support their work. However, they're often seen as too small. The local authorities see them as too small. In order to tackle this, they have collectively come together and said, with other similar organizations, instead of being our assets 800,000 or 1.2 million, we actually have a combined asset of 30 million, and we've got all of this space. Yet still the local authorities aren't seeing them as part of the partnerships that they're sort of seeking. So this is a question to you in a sense of, I don't feel like that diagram that you put up really identified this as an issue, and what would your response be?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, I guess sometimes we add other bits to the diagram. It does get quite crowded, as you can imagine. But yeah, there's a really important point, yeah, it is another part of that funding ecosystem. I was actually up in Sheffield yesterday at an event where we were talking with some work we're doing with the Royal Foundation, which is Prince William's work in this homelessness space. There are people like who've come across social and sustainable capital as a model. So that's the kind of space they were in. We had Ben Rick, who was from there, along with the lady who runs Homes for Good in Scotland, who was one of their first kind of investees. So I think there's a big piece about capacity building and understanding what is the financial capacity of some of those small organisations, and are they ready, and could they be made ready to receive finance? It can be quite hard work, but it's definitely an important part of that, building that local delivery infrastructure. So I do agree. I think you don't just want the big national players coming into places. You need to think about that local infrastructure that can work alongside it. But it's not always straightforward. They're trying to. I think Lloyds Bank are sort of putting a few steps into that space as well, working with the likes of Sask. But it's a very different way of operating for them. But I think it's an important addition to the piece, definitely. So there's a question over here. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, I'm Blossom. I work for a housing association, but I'm also one of those pesky local politicians that sometimes get in the way. I had a question about I mean, there's clearly a lot happening in the investment in housing space, and I guess my reflection in the sector is that there's a lot of people trying to do the deals individually, and I wondered if, and no one seems to be getting quite over the line yet, is my other thought on that. So I wondered, with the spending review and particularly the announcement around the National Housing Bank, what your reflections might be on what opportunities or otherwise that might provide.
I mean, it's good. I think part of the challenge is there's just been so much policy change going on in the last few months that it's quite a struggle to keep on top of all of it at the same time, because as you say, with the whole devolution agenda, you've got the National Housing Bank, you've got a National Wealth Fund as well being asked to revisit their own strategy as well, and the likes of Homes England, and then all this stuff on the pension side. So part of the challenge is just helping all of those people work out how they change their bit of the ecosystem in a way that it all sort of talks to each other. So for example, in like a week or so's time, we've actually got we're having a call with the two teams within MHCLG, one of whom is driving the local growth agenda and the other one is driving the pensions reform agenda, and trying to help them work out how what they're both doing fits together, because they sort of say in the policy, yes, you should refer to your local growth plan, but when you look at some of these local growth plans, as an investor, you don't look at it and think, oh, I can see how I can invest in that. So I think a big part of it is just thinking about how do you talk the right language to the right counterparty in the right situation. There's I don't know your experience in local government, but when we talk to people in local government, we often start from the position that they just don't understand what institutional investment is. So you have to go through quite a lot of education. Say, this is what they can do, this is what they can't do. So it's neither a magic bullet nor is it free money. It's kind of somewhere in between, but it can be quite useful if you marshal it in the right way. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of kind of just getting, and then similarly on the investment side, they don't understand how local government works. They don't understand some of the pressures. So, yeah, I think there's just a lot to work through. But there is this. I think the exciting thing for me is that a lot of the local government pensions. It's not that they've looked at it properly and decided it's not for them. They just haven't looked at it. So I think that says to me there must be a latent opportunity there for some of that long-term patient money to be deployed in some of those things. So it's probably where I'd
I was just
position.
thinking, Sam, as well, we do have 4 or 5 people on housing, by the way. The person you might want to, if you go to our website, is get in contact with Andy Smith or Amy Ingham. We have 2 of them on it. We also run the sustainability standard for housing, social housing, which is bankrolled by Lloyds Bank. So we're quite strong. I'd say 60% of our pipeline is housing, social and affordable housing. So there are people there who can help. Thanks very much for listening to all that.
Thank you.